gentlemen, Chips Podcast, Ryan Amick, and joined by, I'm Tyler Melito, joined by Ryan Amick. It's been a minute. Ryan, how are you, sir?
It's fantastic being back. I miss the studio, all the bright lights, the lava lamp always on lockdown, entering the building, we got a little fixture over there. Everything about this place I missed. It's so good to be back.
It is good
Finally,
to be back.
it feels like a real show. And we got some real sports to talk about, finally. Our whole off season, we were talking about what could happen, what's going to happen in these sports, and now we got almost every sport under the sun live and ready to talk about, including one of the biggest sports in America, the NFL. Week 2 finished off last night, and it was in Vegas for the first time in NFL history. The Raiders beating the Saints 34-24. That was a bit of a shocker right there, upsetting the favorites of the Saints in that one. The Raiders' offense, oh my God, looks very, very good so far this season.
I was reasonably surprised, to be completely honest. And by the way, if you want to listen to our summer episodes, they're on YouTube. Type in Chips Podcast or Tyler Melito. They're in the channel. There's a full playlist. Bada bing, bada boom. I thought it was good content.
Yeah, no, I wasn't trying to discredit it or anything.
Yeah.
It feels better to be back in the studio doing a real show. But definitely, that was some great content. Make sure to check out our YouTube videos. They will be in under Tyler's name for the Chips Podcast. But yes, going back to the Raiders-Saints game, opening day in the Death Star in Vegas. And if it wasn't for COVID, the crowds would be going crazy in that one. You could probably hear it on the Strip in Vegas. How
100%.
they'd be cheering for their Raiders, beating the Saints in that one. Derek Carr, another impressive performance for him. A lot of skepticism towards him going into the season. Some people thought maybe John Gruden didn't want him as their number one quarterback. They brought in Marcus Mariota in the offseason as kind of a security blanket in that sense. But Derek Carr is proving that he could be the starting QB1 for this Raiders team. Throwing three touchdowns, last night. Josh Jacobs looking one of the best running backs in the league once again, dominant on the ground, and it was just too much for the Saints, who look very lost offensively without Michael Thomas.
I was going to say, Michael Thomas out with the ankle injury, probably will be out for at least one more week, maybe even 2. And Drew Brees, he's getting up there in age. He's 41 years old. The Saints try to add another pass catching option in Emmanuel Sanders. He was a non-factor with just 1 catch and 18 yards. Alvin Kamara had a huge night with 2 touchdowns on the ground, plus an additional 95 yards in receiving. But the Saints sorely need Michael Thomas. And frankly, I think New Orleans at 1-1, I don't like their odds to go deep in the playoffs this year. I think there are just too many good teams. Maybe they'll make the playoffs as the NFC South winner. But after that, I don't think they make it very far. Because this game exposed a lot of their weaknesses. And that if you just take away Michael Thomas, not, I guess, completely or a good amount, it being in this case he didn't play at all, and just play competent on offense like the Raiders did, 100%, or you increase your odds of winning tenfold, I think. And if you're one of those better teams, like a Green Bay, who the Saints play this coming week, or a Tampa Bay, who's in their division, Atlanta, who's in their division, Minnesota, Seattle, San Francisco, who we'll talk more about later, might be a lot weaker, but you never know. It's really hard to buy into the Saints stock right now. I'm selling my stock right now.
I feel where you're coming from. It's a little early, week 2, to be discounting their playoff hopes, but I feel for them they're just kind of running out of opportunities. I mean, Drew Brees is not getting any younger, obviously. The past 3 seasons, they've had very good chances to go to the Super Bowl. They failed on all 3 occasions. Of course, 2017 Minnesota Miracle prevented them from going to the NFC Championship. The year after that, a very controversial call, Nicole Roby-Coleman, non-pass interference call that prevented them from going to the conference finals yet again. And last year, losing in the first round to the Vikings. I mean, each of those 3 playoff stints, I thought they could have gone at least to the NFC Championship game, if not the Super Bowl. So now that Drew Brees is getting older, they're starting to get a little more injured. Michael Thomas is out, losing some pieces on defense. I feel like the Saints are just running out of time here. So games like yesterday are kind of proving of that. I mean, Drew Brees threw some bad throws. He's losing arm strength, of course. He's, I think, only 4 yards per attempt or something like that. He's not throwing the ball deep anymore like he used to. It's just not the same Saints team. They are in a bit of trouble. Lucky for them, it's early on. They're 1-1. Like you mentioned, teams like the Falcons and Panthers in their division, don't think they'll have many playoff hopes. So the real challenge is the Buccaneers, who they beat week 1. Great win for them in week 1, but follow up with a loss on Monday night, which is usually Drew Brees' night. He's broken almost every record under the sun on Monday nights. He has a great Monday night record. Couldn't come through for the Saints last night, but that's not the only notable game of Week 2. Another primetime game that caught a lot of people for surprise is the Seahawks-Patriots game. That was just a barn burner from start to finish. That was very competitive, very entertaining game to watch.
110% agree. Seattle, they look really good. Russell Wilson, obviously, 5 touchdowns passing. And all along, all offseason, they've been saying, let Russ cook. Let Russ cook.
Yeah.
I think they let him cook.
You want to hear a wild stat?
Sure.
Russell Wilson, I don't know if you heard this, but he has 9, as you mentioned, 5 touchdowns on Sunday night, 9 touchdowns on the season. Guess how many incompletions he has on the season?
9.
11. But it's pretty wild to think that he has almost as many touchdowns as incompletions through 2 weeks. And it's like you said, they're letting Russ cook, finally. He is an MVP caliber player. He's one of the best players the league has to offer. If you're the Seahawks, you should have done this years ago. Let him cook. You're finally somewhat building a respectable offensive line. Either way, he's great at adapting, getting outside the pocket, making plays on his own. He's feeding guys. They're still feeding guys like Chris Carson, except now it's through the air. And they're letting Russell Wilson just air it out. He has so many weapons now. DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, even Greg Olsen, who they signed in the offseason. This offense can be one of the best in the NFC. And then you look at the defensive side. Jamal Adams already can feel the impact of him on this team. How dominant he's been, even though some people thought he'd be a little bored on that Seahawks defense. He's proven them wrong so far. He's everywhere on the field. He was key towards the end of this Patriots-Seahawks game of getting stops, stopping Cam Newton from driving down the field. And we haven't even mentioned how this game ended. Crazy ending. Deja vu, kind of, because it was another Seahawks-Patriots game that came down to the final play. 1 yard line, goal line stands. Except the Seahawks this time were the ones rejoicing, celebrating a victory, stopping Cam Newton from scoring on the last play of the game. Great win for the Seahawks. They're 2-0. They're looking like one of the top teams in NFC. But also, if you're the Patriots, you can't be mad about this loss.
100% agree. I think Cam Newton, through 2 weeks, he's looked great.
Amazing.
He hasn't looked like maybe 2015 MVP Cam Newton, but he has looked pretty damn close.
Then again, it wouldn't be reasonable to hold him to those standards.
No.
I mean, that was obviously the peak prime of his career. So you can't double a peak. That's the definition of a peak. It happens once. That's your top performance. So, of course, Cam Newton's not going to really be putting up 2015 numbers, but he doesn't have to for this Patriots team. Because similar to his 2015 season, he has a great defense he can rely on. He's got a great coach in Bill Belichick. Even though Ron Rivera was a great coach, he's got an upgrade in coach. He's got an upgrade in defense. The team revolves around him on offense, and he's carrying the load. Almost 400 yards passing, 47 yards rushing, 2 scores on the ground. Great game for Cam Newton. Couldn't come up with the win, unfortunately, for Patriot fans, but still a solid showing for them. Another great primetime game, Week 2. Now let's look at some of the other matchups that caught us off guard. Very good matchups. Chiefs-Chargers. That one going to overtime.
That one's interesting.
That whole game is interesting.
Yeah.
If you want to get into it, what happened before the game even started.
Yeah. So, I'm going to be completely honest. I wasn't paying so much attention to this game because it was U.S. Open Sunday. Bryson DeChambeau, shout out if you want to come on the show. Dominating, winning the U.S. Open at Winged Foot. But yeah, so Tyrod Taylor, whatever how he goes by.
I believe it's Tyrod, but
it's either or, I think. He was expected to be the starter, has been a starter all season, started week 1, was started all week in practice. But then he has a chest issue, whatever, I don't know, there hasn't been so many details that came out, but he was rushed to the hospital an hour or so before kickoff. Like, I think head coach Anthony Lynn didn't know that he wasn't at the stadium until after the coin toss. So they throw in Justin Herbert, the sixth overall pick in this past year's draft, out of Oregon. Played phenomenally, in my opinion. 22 of 33, 311 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. So not great in that regard, but still solid. And the Chargers ended up losing only by 3 in overtime, like you mentioned. And Harrison Butker drilling multiple 58-yard kicks before the game winner because there's a penalty and then they called timeout, and the Chargers did. So the Chargers had a legitimate chance of winning this game. And I think Herbert deserves a lot of the credit for that, being thrown into a situation very few quarterbacks ever have to go through.
Yeah, like as you said, he was literally thrown into the mix an hour before kickoff. Nobody expected this. A lot of people thought he might just redshirt the entire year, just sit behind Tyrod Taylor. He was a pretty raw prospect coming out of college. Didn't have the best season this year, so they were going to kind of sit him, let him learn the playbook, and just marinate in this offense and just take his time. But instead, week 2, he's thrown into the mix, and this could have gone wrong in so many ways, but it takes a Harrison Butker 58-yard field goal to lose to the defending Super Bowl
Two of them, by the way, because he drilled 2 of them in the game.
In overtime to barely lose to the Super Bowl champion Chiefs. I mean, if you're a Chargers fan, it's a loss. But like the Patriots, it's not a bad loss. You don't feel bad after this loss. It's not going to be bad locker room chemistry after this loss. It's not a deflating loss like that. Chargers, very impressive through 2 weeks. They easily could have lost the first week, though, with the Bengals kicker pulling his hamstring and missing the kick, which allowed the Chargers to win week 1. So if that went the other way and they lost week 1, then they might be in a bit of a worse situation, down 0-2 in the season. But they're 1-1. They're right in the thick of things in one of the most interesting conferences, I think, this year, the AFC West. Obviously, the Chiefs dominating this conference probably the rest of the year. But that's to be expected. But then you have the Raiders, 2-0. Their offense looking very dominant as well. They've had their own version of a Tyreek Hill that they drafted in Henry Ruggs. They have a workhorse back in Josh Jacobs. Derek Carr's starting to air it out more, which
Darren Waller too.
Before. I mean, this Raiders offense is looking very nice. The Chargers barely losing to the Chiefs. They're still 1-1 on the season. They have playoff hopes for sure, especially if Justin Herbert can repeat and even grow on his first performance. Because as your first debut performance, throwing 300 yards, that's pretty impressive. Even getting a touchdown as well.
And you didn't even mention the Broncos, who, although are 0-2, they lost by 2 in their first game to Tennessee. Then they lost by 5 to Pittsburgh. Now, that being said, Denver, big blow at injuries, and I think that's where we should start shifting this conversation. The injuries in week 2, galore. Broncos alone. They lost Drew Lock to an AC joint. He's out for about 2 to 6 weeks, they're saying. They lost their top wide receiver in Cortland Sutton to a torn ACL, who, by the way, was already dealing with a shoulder issue. So big blow to them, but I think the Broncos could bounce back somewhat. I don't think they're going to be a pushover for the rest of the year.
So my thing with the Broncos, going into the season, I thought they were going to be a playoff team for sure.
I did too.
I definitely thought they had high hopes. They made so many nice moves in the offseason and in the draft to improve this team, especially on the offensive end. But then when you look at all the injuries already to this new offense,
Von Miller, too.
Obviously the biggest one. Your quarterback going to be out multiple weeks. You have Jeff Driscoll coming in. Obviously not the same there. Cortland Sutton is a very big injury because not only is he out for the year, but he affects the growth of Jerry Jeudy, KJ Hamler, who they drafted, who they expect to have some production, but now they have to be the go-tos in this offense, which is very early for rookies to be thrown into the mix in, especially because they don't have their QB. They have to be with Jeff Driscoll now. So that's a huge blow to this offense that made a lot of improvements in the offseason. Even Philip Lindsay, he's going to be out for a couple weeks, but having him gone hurts a lot. So this offense is just taking so many blows. And then that's not even to mention guys like Von Miller, who are going to be out for the year defensively for this team. That's big, big news. Also, A.J. Bouye going to be out for a couple weeks. I mean, there's just so many injuries on this team in general. And with this offense being so young and inexperienced and not having a lot of playing time together, this might not be the best year for the Broncos. I think injuries, COVID, all this coinciding, I don't know if hopefully for them, they can bounce back and be contenders for a playoff run.
I agree.
But with everything that's happened so early on, being 0-2 in a division with the 2-0 Raiders, the 2-0 Chiefs, the Chargers will look really good. It's going to be tough for the Broncos. I'm not saying they can't do it. I had high hopes for them coming into the season. I thought they'd be a wild card team. But
there are only so many seats at the table.
Yeah, even though they added another seat, even though there's 7 teams now, there's just so many to go around. I mean, the AFC is stacked when you really think about it. We've obviously gone into the AFC West, how stacked it is. But then you think of teams like the Ravens, the Steelers, the Titans, I mean, the Patriots. You have to have room for these teams as well. The Bills, even the Browns, even though they haven't had a good start, just them on paper, they look like a playoff team. So there's just so many mouths to feed in the AFC. Hopefully, for the Broncos' sake, these injuries don't ruin the season for them. But boy, did they have a lot. Not as many, though, as the Niners, who, wow. I talk about Super Bowl hangovers. It's not even their fault that they're having a Super Bowl hangover.
I blame the turf.
So this might be one of the worst hangovers you could have coming off the Super Bowl, just based on the amount of injuries they had this week alone. It's unheard of.
Yeah.
It's so many.
Yeah, so they played the Jets in the Meadowlands, and for context, there was a lot of concern about the turf there. Apparently, it was very sticky. I don't know exactly what that means, sticky turf. I didn't play a lot of turf sports in high school, not going to lie. But Nick Bosa, the reigning defensive rookie of the year, out for the year with an ACL injury. Jimmy Garoppolo, their quarterback, going to miss time with a ankle injury.
Injured, yeah. It seems like the only time he's healthy is when they're successful. Like last year, he finally had a healthy year, gets into the Super Bowl. The year before, they were starting to win with him. He gets injured, and then they...
I think he has, 4 losses? Garoppolo does as a starter of the 49ers?
Yeah, he doesn't lose.
Something like that?
That's his one thing. Like, the stats won't jump off the page at you. He doesn't make crazy big-time throws like some of the big names in the NFL. But he knows how to win, and I feel like a lot of that comes from his Patriot way, his Patriot background. Yeah. All the stuff he learned from Tom Brady and Bill Belichick. He knows how to get things done, win games, finish drives. He's very clutch in that respect. Obviously, aside from the Super Bowl, which everyone brings up to hate on him, that was not. It's a high-pressure situation. Not everyone's Patrick Mahomes and can make 50-yard passes down the field to win Super Bowls down 10. But Jimmy Garoppolo, nonetheless, very successful.
There were some bad calls, too.
There were some bad calls, but Jimmy Garoppolo, nonetheless, very important part of this team. They are not the same offense without him, and it's going to show in these next weeks. I mean, they took care of the Jets because of the Jets. Right. So these injuries didn't really matter in this game because the whole team could have got injured, and their backups probably would have beat the Jets. But going forward, in their tough division, we talked about the AFC West, the NFC West, just the west side of the country. Boy, did they have some playmakers out there. Talking about the Seahawks, the Rams, and the Cardinals, all 2-0. And you look at this Niners team, it's like, you could be a very good team still, even with all these injuries, and it's still like, can we get in the playoffs with the division we're in right now? So the Broncos and Niners are in very similar situations in regards of the strength of the division and also all the injuries they suffered this week and just the season so far.
And here's the funny thing. We mentioned Bosa, we mentioned Garoppolo, but that ain't it. Solomon Thomas, I believe it was a torn ACL. Raheem Mostert, sprained MCL, going to miss a few weeks. Tevin Coleman, a knee injury that's going to sideline him. So they're down their top 2 running backs. They're probably going to be Jerick McKinnon, who missed his 2 past seasons with torn ACLs. Sucks for him. Or it sucks in that regard because they were a really good ground and pound team. Deebo Samuel, he's still on IR. He's expected to miss at least 1 more week with recovering from that Jones fracture in his foot. George Kittle missed last week with a knee injury. He's also expected to miss this week, being the fact they're still playing in New York against the Giants at the Meadowlands. And that's the thing. And I think there might be even more. I could be missing some, but you get my point. Injuries upon injuries upon injuries. And I think that's ultimately what's going to do the 49ers in, simply because not even their play and their play calling and whatnot, it's just your best ability is availability. And when you're not available, your best players is going to be very hard to win. So I think this year, if you're a 49ers fan, temper your expectations. Just don't worry about this season. They'll probably be back next year. And honestly, I think this is a year you might want to take off a year of the 49ers, given how good that NFC West is, like you just mentioned.
Just like their other San Francisco counterparts, the Warriors kind of took the year off this year. They'll definitely be back next year, that's for sure, just like the Niners will. But injuries galore in San Francisco. Both teams, after making playoffs and Super Bowls and finals and all that, injuries do them wrong. They might have to take 2020 off, regroup, and come back stronger and better than ever next year. A couple more games we should touch note upon in Week 2. This might be one of my favorite games of Week 2. Titans-Jaguars. You think of some of the
that was an interesting one.
You think of some of the premier quarterback battles throughout these couple weeks. So you had Mahomes-Watson Week 1. And you had Watson-Jackson Week 2. Brady-Breeze Week 1. So you have some pretty marquee matchups. I don't think anyone really touted Ryan Tannehill and Gardner Minshew as one of those performances where 2 quarterbacks are just duking it out. But that definitely was the case on Sunday. Both quarterbacks just absolutely putting the teams on their back, putting up crazy numbers. Gardner Minshew, a week after having 1 incompletion, threw, I believe, 4 touchdowns against the Titans and was just
3 touchdowns.
3
touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Tannehill had 4 touchdowns, no interceptions.
Tannehill had 4 touchdowns to 6 incompletions. So very accurate, very big part of their offense.
In a game, mind you, where Derrick Henry only had 84 yards on 25 carries, so it was really all on Tannehill to get the Titans this win.
And A.J. Brown wasn't playing,
That's
so
true.
some of their best playmakers were not part of this game. Mm-hmm. And Ryan Tannehill still found a way to get it done. Also, Gardner Minshew just carrying this Jags team on his back. Everyone thought this team was in full tank mode.
Myself included.
1 or 2 wins on the season. They already have 1 win on the season. They could have very easily had their 2nd win this week. Gardner Minshew is playing like one of the better quarterbacks in this league, and people need to start realizing this. Some of the plays he make are it's just not natural for most quarterbacks. I mean, his ability to escape out of the pocket, especially when there's a lot of pressure, he's doing that like some guys like Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson will do. He's great at scrambling, buying time, finding the open receiver, and he's accurate with the ball. Even though he had 2 picks in this game, he had only 1 incompletion the game before, and still was just very unstoppable in this entire game. I mean, I'm very high on Gardner Minshew. A lot of people want them to tank for Trevor Lawrence, but I think they have something going with Gardner Minshew and should look to other parts of their team, especially defensively, because their whole defense is flipped in a matter of 3 years.
Yeah.
I think they really need to start building maybe the defensive line in the draft and build around Gardner Minshew, because you can build around Gardner Minshew. Obviously, you would love to have Trevor Lawrence. He's a once-in-a-generation type of talent, probably. We don't know yet. He hasn't played an NFL game yet. But with Gardner Minshew, I believe you can make it somewhere in this league if you start just building around the defense, building around other areas of weakness in this team. So,
and they already got some nice pieces on defense. They have Miles Jack. They have Josh Allen, who they took last year. So there are some nice pieces. And also, mind you, Minshew, he had 2 interceptions. One of them came on the last drive, or the second to last drive of the game, where the Jaguars down 3 with 1:36 to go in the game. Minshew throws an interception. So they definitely had a chance. So I think if you're a Jags fan, you should be really excited about what is possibly to come. Getting back to the injuries a little bit, because I think that is a storyline that is it's been very talked about in mainstream media, so why not have us talk about it? Our New York Football Giants, Ryan. Season's over. Saquon Barkley, done for the year, torn ACL. That's all I'm going to say. Christian McCaffrey, the number 1 overall pick in a lot of fantasy drafts, although I don't have him, neither do you.
Yeah, if you had a top pick in fantasy, Sunday was just not the best day.
He's out for multiple weeks with an ankle injury. Let's see, what else? There's a lot. We mentioned a lot of them with the 49ers and the Broncos, but yeah, not a great week. Anthony Barr, done for the year with a shoulder injury. The Eagles, their offensive line is hurt even more. Paris Campbell, knee injury for the Colts. It's just, it sucks, honestly. And that brings up the question of preseason games. The NFL canceled them this year. They shortened training camp because of COVID. Makes sense. But there was a lot of talk about maybe doing this going forward. Get rid of the preseason games and shorten the training camp so that way players are a little bit more well-rested. But we see it now. A lot of these guys haven't played in 6, 7, 8 months. A lot of them haven't played since 2019. And the injuries are starting to show. So maybe the NFL has to reconsider maybe not having 4 preseason games, but maybe having 2 and a longer training camp. So that way, players can at least get into somewhat of a game shape.
I'd be in favor of maybe 2 or less.
I would as well.
Preseason games. So it definitely doesn't need to be 4. I was pretty happy they got rid of the preseason because I didn't really think it did these players any good. Because for the majority of the players that got injured, they're starters, they wouldn't even really play in the preseason. So either way, they're not going to get playing time in those preseason games. So why have them in the first place? Obviously, it's good for the bench guys and some guys just trying to make the team, obviously, to get reps and to show what they're worth in that aspect. But when talking about all the injuries to star players that happened this week and that might happen in the next weeks to come, I don't think the preseason would just eliminate those injuries. And if so, maybe those injuries would happen in the preseason anyway. So the injuries would happen either way. Why have a preseason where the injuries are going to happen in the first place? So I'm not a huge fan of having preseasons. I feel like training camp should have been longer. I feel like training camp just didn't even happen this year. It went by so fast. There's so much non-contact drills they did.
14 days of padded practice. Not going to get it done.
That's not acceptable. If you have about a month plus of contact and scrimmages and just actual play, I feel like that could definitely help with the injury situation, even with no preseason.
COVID-19 definitely didn't help that this year.
Yeah,
just
and
because
this is
of all
just a
the
very odd
precautions.
year. People have not been out and about exercising, all that good stuff as much as usual because of all the restrictions. So people were bound to get injured, that's for sure. I don't think it's panic mode, bring back the preseason. I don't think that should be the answer. But the injuries are definitely concerning. Hopefully it goes down in week 3 because this was a very big spike in week 2. Because also week 1 there wasn't that much noteworthy and that many noteworthy
There were more soft tissue injuries that were going to be recoverable in a couple weeks.
Yeah.
These are season-ending injuries.
And a lot of them ACL type stuff. I don't know if having preseason will help with the just non-contact injuries like that. I feel like just having more practice time, more drills, more of a training camp.
Will be interesting.
That's what they need.
Yeah.
It's more of a training camp for sure.
One more game before we go to break from week 2. I can't believe I overlooked this, and you probably were getting there.
Yeah.
Dallas against the Falcons. Holy cow! 20-0 lead the Falcons had in the first quarter, and they lose 40-39.
Talk about deja vu. We were talking Seahawks Patriots, how their game was reminiscent of a Super Bowl that most people remember. Talk about the Falcons and that Super Bowl most people will also remember, where they blew a 25-point lead. They blew a 20-point lead now this time. Obviously, the stakes aren't as high, so it's not going to be that embarrassing. But if you're the Falcons,
they're pretty high though. 0-2 at this point for the Falcons.
I don't know who to look to for all these choking issues. Is it just coaching? Is it just the offense? It just starts to stall towards the end of games? Because for the first 3 quarters, they were cooking. Calvin Ridley was destroying this weak Cowboys secondary. And as soon as fourth quarter came around, they just couldn't stop the Cowboys. Dak Prescott got 3 touchdowns on the ground, which is pretty crazy to think about.
On 18 yards.
Yeah, it was just all QB sneaks, but they just couldn't stop him in that respect. And the biggest fumble for them came on the onside kick, obviously. Just a blunder.
In the world?
Just were not thinking with their heads. They just let the ball roll to the Cowboys. No one fell on it. Probably the easiest onside kick the Cowboys will ever have. Then they nailed the field goal to win the game. And they actually had fans, which was nice for them because they got to hear them celebrate.
Yeah.
What a crazy victory that was. And another crazy stat before we go to break about this game. This is the first time ever that a team has scored 39 points or more, had no turnovers, and lost. It's happened 440 times. This is the first time a team's lost doing that. Very out there stat, but when you just think about how much they were up, how good they were playing, no turnovers, just playing smart football, and then just to choke it all away in the fourth quarter, Falcons need to look themselves in the mirror because that's unacceptable, especially in the division with the Saints and Bucs as the favorites. This win would have been huge for momentum-wise for them. So, Falcons fans, I feel for you.
I feel for them a little bit. I think one part of the blame is something, I don't know who, whether it's the offensive coordinator or whatnot. Julio Jones, 2 catches for 24 yards. He dropped a touchdown pass, albeit it was from a wide receiver on a trick play. But when you're arguably the best receiver in football, you got to get more than 2 catches. I don't know if that goes on Matt Ryan. I don't know if it goes on Julio Jones, the offensive coordinator. Who knows? But they need to get Julio Jones more involved. Don't get me wrong, Calvin Ridley, balling out. 109 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 7 catches in this game. But Julio Jones, they need to feed him more. So we'll see what they do.
Absolutely.
All right, let's take a quick break. We'll come back in hopefully 2 minutes or so. This song is called Zipper by The Hex, so I hope you enjoy. ERW Real College Radio. This is the Chips Podcast. Tyler Melito, joined by Ryan Amick as always. First block, we talked about a lot of the NFL Week 2. Let's look ahead a little bit to Week 3. The NFL released their power rankings, or ESPN, released their power rankings. Top 10 teams. Kansas City Chiefs, Baltimore Ravens, Seattle Seahawks, Green Bay Packers, your top 4. No surprise there. All of them are 2-0. New Orleans at 5. They dropped down a couple spots after that loss to the Raiders. Buffalo Bills at the 6th spot. They're up 1 spot, although they've beaten the Jets and the Dolphins. So we'll talk about that a little bit later, I'm sure. Los Angeles Rams, they got the number 7 spot, 2-0 so far. Tennessee Titans at number 8. San Francisco 49ers at number 9. And rounding out the top 10, you got the New England Patriots at 1-1 on the season, down 1 spot from last week. Anything that catches your eye from that, Ryan, that list?
Well, I'm just looking at the top 2 spots because they have a matchup.
Monday Night Football next week. I'm excited.
That one of the biggest games of the year, undoubtedly. The 2 favorites out of the AFC to reach the Super Bowl, both 2-0, both their quarterbacks absolutely cooking. Just both teams in general look very unstoppable. I'm very intrigued by that matchup, as all NFL fans are.
And the fact that game's on ESPN, who, by the way, notoriously has one of arguably the worst broadcasts out of CBS, Fox, NBC, and ESPN. Kudos to them. I'm excited to watch this game.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mahomes, Jackson, last 2 MVPs, 2 great offenses, and 2 very solid defenses. Let's be real. And should be interesting.
Yeah, and just looking at the rest of the power rankings, a team, I understand why they're here. I just, before the season, never would have thought they'd be this high. The Rams at 7.
100% agree.
They've looked very good, though. They've earned that ranking. But just this offense, I thought, would really have struggled. They lost a lot on the offensive line. They were very banged up there. I was worried because Jared Goff is not very good under pressure. So if that offensive line was not able to hang up, they got rid of Todd Gurley.
No.
I didn't know how this offense would have managed, but shame on me for doubting Sean McVay's magic and his power to keep this offense going and going strong. Tyler Higbee's been huge for them so far. It's been Jared Goff's favorite target. Both their receivers, Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp, been solid so far. And their run game, it's been running back by committee, but every running back so far has looked decent in some way.
I will say, though, their running backs have taken a hit. Cam Akers left the game on Sunday with a rib injury, and Malcolm Brown, I believe he left with an ankle injury, if I'm not mistaken. They're both, I don't know how long they're going to be out, but so it will be interesting to see how that goes. Because a running back by committee, we saw with the 49ers last season, can work really well when you have some solid options. Now it looks like it's going to be on Darrell Henderson, at least for this coming week. So interesting to see, will Goff rely more on his arm, whether it be Higbee, Kupp, Woods, or whomever, or will Sean McVay do something crazy with Darrell Henderson? Who knows? But Rams, I 100% agree. They've beaten the Cowboys and the Eagles through 2 weeks in pretty decisive manner for the most part. So,
yeah, very good if you're a Rams fan. Looking at some of the Week 3 matchups, obviously we talked about the Ravens and Chiefs a little bit. Right now, the Ravens are favored 3.5 points in that matchup. Who do you think will come out of that one?
I mean, it's in Baltimore, but there's got to be a full fans. I think if there were fans there as like a normal season, I'd give it to the Ravens, 100%. This one, I think, is going to be a little bit tougher, and I'm going to say Baltimore, though, simply because the Chiefs, they had to blow Sammy Watkins. He's hurt. He's going to miss some time, it looks like. So it really is going to rely on Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce for Patrick Mahomes and Clyde Edwards-Helaire. 3 very solid players, don't get me wrong. But I think Baltimore being at home, they've taken care of business so far pretty handedly in their first 2 games, whereas the Chiefs, they struggled a little bit last week. They weren't, I wouldn't say they're top-notch against the Texans in Week 1, although they won that game in pretty decisive fashion. I think the Ravens, they have that a little bit more of an it factor early on in the year. But honestly, remember that Chiefs-Rams game from a couple of years ago on Monday Night Football?
Absolutely.
That's what I want. Something competitive. Doesn't have to be a blowout or 50 points on each side, but I want something competitive where I'm going to be coming back from class at 9 o'clock or whenever class ends, have my dinner, and enjoy some Monday Night Football.
Yeah, I don't think it'll disappoint in that aspect. I think it'll definitely be a very entertaining game. If you're talking about betting, I would take the Chiefs at plus 3.5.
Oh yeah, cover the spread.
I feel like it might come down to a field goal or so I definitely would take the Chiefs.
2 top kickers, by the way.
But if we're just talking about who's going to win this game, I agree. I think the Ravens look unstoppable, and it's not just because of Lamar Jackson. It's because their defense is scary, so scary. I mean, the Browns' first week. They got 6 points. I think they scored a touchdown. It wasn't 2 field goals. But nonetheless, they just absolutely shut them down. Their whole arsenal of weapons could not do anything against the Ravens' defense. Patrick Queen looks so good for them already.
We were excited about that.
He's the linebacker that the Ravens always have and have been missing for a couple of years. Obviously, from Ray Lewis to Terrell Suggs to C.J. Mosley, once he left, they were kind of trying to fill the gap. I think they got it already in Patrick Queen. He looks amazing so far. Their secondary is just totally locked down. Will Fuller, 0 catches, 0 yards in their matchup in Week 2. So I feel like their secondary will give the Chiefs receivers some fits, especially with Sammy Watkins being out. More people will be targeting Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. So a lot of the pressure will be on Mahomes to make plays, to find people open, maybe like a McCall Hardman or Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who had somewhat of a down week compared to his first week, but I still think, I mean, the Chiefs' offense is going to be great no matter what.
Yeah.
No matter what defense they're playing. I just feel this Ravens defense is going to give them more trouble than they're used to, especially because the Chargers, they have a solid defense, not up to the Ravens' part, but they gave the Chiefs some trouble in their Week 2 matchup. So we're talking about the Ravens' defense, how great Lamar has been, obviously. I mean, I don't see the Ravens losing this one at home. I think it'll be very close, very good game. Betting-wise, go for the Chiefs. But if you want to bet on the money line, though, just straight up who you think's going to win, I'd pick the Ravens personally.
I will say, the Ravens, their secondary did take a hit. Tavon Young out for the season. Another guy, torn ACL, so he's done, so it'll be interesting to see. But you mentioned Patrick Queen, very solid through 2 games. Calais Campbell, great addition. And Earl Thomas, the Ravens let him go after his whole incident with his wife during the offseason. I don't think they've missed him very much. Looked very solid. Marcus Peters has played a solid at corner, so should be a very fun matchup. You got some great matchups individually. Mahomes and Jackson, Andy Reid and John Harbaugh, Edwards-Helaire versus Mark Ingram at the running backs, Mark Andrews and Travis Kelce at tight ends, Harrison Butker and Justin Tucker at kicker. I mean,
even the
let's
kickers are
go.
premier. That's
I am
how
excited.
That's how deep these teams are. You
Yeah.
can even look at the kicker matchup and be like, these could be some of the top kickers in the league.
And then Tyreek Hill and Marquise Brown as well at wide receiver.
Obviously, yes.
Can't understate that one.
Hopefully that game lives up to the hype because we're hyping it up, but rightfully so.
God, I hope
Because
so.
I mean, just if you look at this game on paper, this should be a very good team, very good matchup. Another matchup should be very exciting to watch. 2 great quarterbacks as well. Packers and Saints.
Sunday Night Football.
Sunday Night Football. NFC powerhouses going at it. Aaron Rodgers v. Drew Brees. Big factor in this one, obviously. Will Michael Thomas be playing? That is obviously
And will Devontae Adams be playing because he left the game with a hamstring?
That's true. That's another guy who got injured this week. So obviously their 2 best targets are questionable. Whether they play or not is a huge factor. Currently, the Saints are sitting at -3, the favorites in this one. I'm leaning towards the Packers, though. I mean, Aaron
110%.
Rodgers looks like MVP Aaron Rodgers. And Aaron Jones, we were wrong on him. Let's admit it now. Because we both thought last year was an aberration. He was like, oh, he's not going to get that many touchdowns. He's a solid back, but wow, he's been great these past 2 weeks, especially last week. 3 touchdowns. And just through the air and on the ground, just a total factor. Aaron Rodgers loves him as a target. And if Devontae Adams is gone, you know he's going to be going to Aaron Jones all game long. And just also, if you're looking at the Packers defense, very good pass rush. It's going to give Drew Brees some trouble. I like the Packers a lot in this one.
I'm mad at myself. Aaron Jones, I said, no way he's going to do it again. I didn't take him in fantasy football, and I totally regret it. Through 2 games, 234 rushing yards, 3 touchdowns, and then passing game, not been much of a factor. 78 yards and a touchdown. Still very solid, I guess you can say. But, yeah, the Packers are far and away, I think, should win this game. They're in a dome. We saw what Rodgers did in a dome week 1 against the Vikings. The Saints, they're not going to have their top target. At least at 100%. I think Adams is more likely to play than Thomas, just because of the severity of their 2 injuries. And frankly, like we saw last night in Monday Night Football, Drew Brees, he doesn't look great when he doesn't have his top guy. And Aaron Rodgers, I think he could he played most of last season without Devontae Adams. Who says he can't throw to Marquez Valdez-Scantling and Alan Lazard, who, by the way, have balled out through 2 games.
I think Aaron Rodgers is just making them look great, but they're
but I mean,
as well.
That's what I'm saying, though. Aaron Rodgers can take nothing and turn it into something.
Anything.
Drew Brees, I don't think he can.
That's what he's been doing his whole career. He's 1 touchdown to a first overall pick to Mercedes Lewis a couple years ago during his very brief stint with the Packers.
By the way, no interceptions for Rodgers so far this year.
No interceptions. That's usual for him as well.
And 1 sack. He's been sacked once through 2 games. So.
I mean, they did versus the Lions and Vikings. Vikings had some good pass rushers, but Lions not very much. The Saints, though, Cam Jordan. Marcus Davenport, I don't know if he's going to play. He didn't play week 2, but he's not going to be that much of a problem, I don't think, for Aaron Rodgers. The only one I'd really be concerned with is Cam Jordan. But hopefully David Bakhtiari can lock him up. Aaron Rodgers can be dishing out dimes all game. I definitely like the Packers, especially at +3. I mean, if they lose, they'll at least cover, because this game is definitely going to be close, I believe.
Here's what I'm thinking. Between the big 3 on each team, Rodgers and Brees, Kamara and Jones, Thomas and Adams, Which three would you rather have saying they're all healthy?
Definitely the Packers 3.
I would agree. I
A
think
lot of
they're
that
more
is
balanced.
because Aaron Rodgers is clearly better than Drew Brees at this point.
Mhm.
I think Michael Thomas, Devontae Adams, most people would probably argue for Michael Thomas, but you could go either way with that one.
And I'd take Kamara over
I'd
Jones.
take Kamara over Jones, but I mean, Jones has proven us wrong before.
Mhm.
He's had a great season. He's had a better season than Kamara at this point. So it's
Through
toss
2
up.
games.
The advantage goes to the clearly better quarterback, which at this point is Aaron Rodgers. Final game to look forward to, week 3 of the NFL season. It's kind of a sleeper game here. Rams-Bills, both 2-0.
1 o'clock game.
The Rams offense, which is cooking against a very solid Bills defense, and a quarterback in Josh Allen, who is doing it all and is not getting any publicity for some of the stats he's been putting up on the ground and through the air. He's been totally dominant. And I don't know if you saw this play, but he literally looks like a fullback when he runs sometimes. The way he stiff-armed, there was one play where he stiff-armed the defender to the ground, stepped over him, and ran another 5 yards or so for the first down. I mean, that's a pure power back move from your quarterback, who could also throw it 60 yards downfield to all the targets they have now. Stephon Diggs, John Brown, Cole Beasley. I mean, Devin Singletary in the backfield. Zach Moss, they have 2 solid running backs, Zach Moss and Devin Singletary. Tons of weapons for this Bills team. Obviously, they're great defensively. They're favored -3 in this one. I'd probably lean towards the Bills in this one. The Rams have had a great start to their season. Cowboys and Eagles. In the Eagles, not the same opponent as the Bills. I think the Bills have the advantage in this one.
See, this is a toss-up, and I am going to disagree with you. I'm going to go with the Rams. The Bills have played the Jets and the Dolphins through 2 weeks.
And they barely beat the Dolphins.
They barely beat the Dolphins,
Surprising.
yeah.
I thought they were going to run away with that one. They were up big at one point. But
Don't get me wrong. Josh Allen has played phenomenal through 2 games. 6 touchdowns, 729 yards, 75 rushing yards. Stephon Diggs looks like he's been a great acquisition for this team. But when you play offenses like the Jets and the Dolphins, you are expected to win. The Rams have a lot different offense. Sure, they're going to miss their 2 running backs, most likely in Brown and Akers, like we mentioned earlier. But Jared Goff, I think, is a much better quarterback than Ryan Fitzpatrick and Sam Darnold, who have looked horrible through 2 weeks. Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp are much better receivers than whoever Rams. Jameson Crowder and Devontae Parker, come on.
What? Oh, I thought you were talking about the Bills.
No, I'm talking about the Dolphins and the Jets.
Yeah.
And then Tyler Higbee has been phenomenal all season long, 2 games. So I think the Rams will give the Bills a little bit too much to handle. Here's where I'm concerned about the Bills. Everyone's saying, 2-0, the Bills, they got this, easy peasy. One hit to Josh Allen that maybe not knocks him out for the season, but let's say he rolls an ankle pretty badly or sprains a knee. Who knows? That's going to change how he thinks. And he said already at the beginning of the year, I don't want to be running the ball that much. That's clearly been a smokescreen. But you have to be worried if he gets hit once, what are they going to do?
I mean, at the same time, you can say that about pretty much every team.
Right, but he puts himself into harm's way by trying to run through everyone.
He definitely needs to be smarter with it. He's kind of like Cam Newton in the fact that he likes to just overpower guys and just plow through them. And it makes for plays, like I mentioned, where he shifts arms the guy to the ground. Pretty entertaining to watch. But it's not always going to happen that way. Sometimes he might knock you hard at the ground. You might...
Someone blindsides him. He gets hit, maybe busts his collarbone. Like, that's why I'm not so...
as much as a concussion, if he's out for a week or 2 just based on that. I mean, that's obviously going to be harmful for this Bills team. But just taking injury out of the equation, if he stays healthy... I understand where you're coming from, but if he stays healthy, definitely the better quarterback between him and Jared Goff. And I think they just have the better... I think the Rams have the better offensive pieces, better offensive coach, but the Bills have very good defense, very good quarterback, good offensive pieces. I like the Bills in this one.
Okay.
It'll be close though. That's why it's
the Bills are at home, so that is a big help.
Take that for what it's worth. With COVID, no fans, but still home field advantage. It's colder. It's not very cold in upstate New York just yet, but
it's getting there.
It's getting there.
I will say though about the Bills, maybe not in this game, but looking forward. Everyone was saying, the Bills are going to win the AFC East now that Tom Brady's in Tampa, who, by the way, has looked horrible through 2 games, I'd say. I am not so confident that the Bills will win the AFC East now. I was on the train that they would, but watching the Patriots through 2 weeks and watching the Bills through 2 weeks, I think the Patriots have this under control. I think Bill Belichick knows exactly what he's doing. Cam Newton has played very well, and once again, the Patriots, they've played through 2 weeks. They played the Dolphins in week 1, the Seahawks in week 2. They're 1-1. The Bills, they haven't played anyone great. So this would be a great test to see how they really stack up. And I'm not even sure if the Rams are a great opponent for the Bills in terms of see how they're stacking up. But there will definitely be an opportunity. Whether it be the Rams this week, the Tennessee Titans in week 5, the Chiefs in week 6. Who knows? Yeah, Ryan and I were just talking. We're going to take a quick break. After this, we're going to talk a little NBA because, Ryan, conference finals are on right now, and the Lakers are up 2-0. Maybe go back to the first time since 2010.
Only the NFL can make us
not talk NBA.
Conference finals in the NBA for the last 10 minutes of the show. But, I mean, that's the power of the NFL. Definitely get into some basketball when we get back from break. Tyler, what are our fans going to be listening to?
This song is called Backseat Driver, which I know all too well, called Boyo. So we'll be back in a moment. You're listening to WERW, Real College Radio. All right, so WERW, Real College Radio. You're listening to the Chips Podcast. We only got a little bit of time left. Tyler Melito and Ryan Amick spent a lot of time talking about the NFL. But Ryan, there is some basketball tonight. The NBA, Lakers, Nuggets, Game 3 of the Western Conference Finals. Lakers currently up 2-0. And as a Laker fan, I am very happy. Sorry, your Knicks not even close to this point.
No.
But what have been your takeaways from this series, though, so far?
Amazing play by LeBron James and Anthony Davis alike. I mean, LeBron hasn't even had to lift a finger, really, in this series. Anthony Davis has just been carrying this team. It's been such a mismatch for Jokic. I mean, going into this matchup, a lot of the hype was Jokic versus Anthony Davis. Who's the best big man in the league? I think Anthony Davis is kind of giving those answers out pretty clearly. Obviously, have to mention, amazing shot. Game 2, final seconds, hits a 3 to win the game while shouting out Kobe in the process. So I feel the Lakers' magic, with everything that happened to them this year, I feel it's very strong. It's not some voodoo magic. I think it's for real right now. And if you're a Lakers fan, you should be feeling very good about yourself. That being said, do not count out the Nuggets. They will do to you what they did to the other LA team and the Utah Jazz alike. I can't recall if they were down 2-0 in both series or not, but they ended up being down 3-1 in both series. Obviously came back in both
They didn't
series.
lose a game. They were only down. They lost game 1. They would win game 2. The Nuggets did.
So it is a little different. That being said, Jamal Murray can light up at any time. He hasn't really in this series so far to that extent. One big game out of him and the Nuggets are right back in it.
Yeah.
And I mean, I do still expect the Lakers to win this series, obviously. I think about Lakers in 6 sounds about right. I don't know the numbers. None of us do. I do believe, though, the Lakers will come out of this one victorious and head to the finals. What do you think, Tyler?
I mean, I have that bias, but I think the Nuggets are just gassed at this point. 2 3-1 comebacks, down 3-1 comebacks in the first 2 rounds. Very impressive, to say the least. Jamal Murray, Nikola Jokic have played phenomenally. Their supporting cast has done well. Michael Malone, their head coach, has done a very good job keeping his team composed and focused. But they haven't faced a team like the Lakers. And I think the Lakers, they have something that their other opponents did not, the Nuggets. The Clippers and the Jazz did not have. 3 big men to throw at Nikola Jokic. Dwight Howard and JaVale McGee, they don't have to put up big numbers. They can just be bodies to tire out Nikola Jokic and then let Anthony Davis feast on him whenever they're not on the floor. So it would be interesting to see how the Nuggets adapt to guard Anthony Davis, because he is a straight-up mismatch for their players. And then, not to mention LeBron James, who has taken a 1B role to Anthony Davis's 1A. But this is the best, I think, co-star LeBron James has ever had in Anthony Davis. And I'm interested to see in the NBA Finals, because I'm assuming the Lakers make it, if it's the Celtics or the Heat, how they'll handle this duo of Davis and James, because the Heat, they got some size and length to throw at him with Bam Adebayo, Jimmy Butler, Andre Iguodala, Jay Crowder. But the Celtics, they have some nice wings as well, and Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Marcus Smart, maybe not against Anthony Davis, but against LeBron James certainly. So I think the finals will be the Lakers' toughest test, to be completely honest.
Well, now that you mentioned we still have the Eastern Conference Finals. Heat and
Let's
Celtics.
call it the segue for everyone listening at home.
Heat currently up 2-1 in the series. They took the first 2 games of the series similar to the Lakers. And the Celtics, those are some rough losses, especially Game 2. We're up 17 at one point. The Heat stormed back. won that one. There was some rumblings in the locker room of people not getting along, being upset at each other. Obviously, there's a lot of emotions going on right now, especially being down 0-2 in the Eastern Conference Finals, which the Celtics have found themselves in previous series before. They've get to the conference finals a lot. Three of the last five? I can't remember them.
They made it in Jason Tatum's rookie year.
3 times in recent memory. Have not.
I think 3 out of the last 6, definitely.
Yeah, somewhere in that range. 3
out of 5, 3 out of 6,
something conference finals. They can't get past that final hump. I don't think they will in this series either. I like the Heat a lot in this one.
I do as well.
Jimmy Butler is establishing himself as the best player on the court and one of the top 10 best players in the league. Numbers will not tell you that, but his play on the court will tell you otherwise. And his play away from the teams he used to be on will also tell you. Look at the Sixers, swept in the first round as soon as he leaves. Timberwolves, the only time they make the playoffs in this century is with Jimmy Butler. The Bulls have been a disaster since he's left. He is so important to every team he goes on, and the Heat were barely a playoff team before he signed with them, and now they might be going to the finals. I think they will be going to the finals. I think we will see LeBron's old team versus new team. Every team related to LeBron, aside from the Cavs, will be in the finals this year. And that just shows you how impressive LeBron's reign has been as well, because as soon as he leaves a team, we're talking about Jimmy Butler, as soon as he leaves, their team is bad. Look at the Cavs right now without LeBron. The Heat, though, they managed as soon as LeBron left, they've stayed afloat somewhat.
But Heat's management's been a lot different. Pat Riley,
so much better.
One of the best front office members in NBA history. Eric Spoelstra, one of the best coaches in league history. So very solid top to bottom. And frankly, I think with the Heat, Jimmy Butler, he's embraced this Heat culture tenfold, and that has trickled down to everyone else on that roster. Bam Adebayo, Tyler Hero, Myers Leonard, Goran Dragic, etc., etc. It's been fun to watch, great to see. But Ryan, this ends our time here today. First Chips podcast in a while.
Great first show back. Missed this place. Finally happy we can be here every week. Won't be at 11 o'clock at night anymore, which is a nice change of pace. Do a little everyone get back from work, 4 to 5 time slot. Just unwind, listen to Chips podcast, give you your daily sports or weekly sports update. But yeah, I feel like that's all the time we have today, unfortunately. It's a pleasure to be back. Tyler, what are we going to listen to on our way out?
Well, because we're required to play 2 songs by the station throughout the show, we've already done that. So I'm going to delight everyone with some country music, because I know Ryan loves it. So to close things out, this is More Than My Hometown.
The show's over.
By Morgan Wallen. For Ryan Amick, I'm Tyler Milito. Thank you all so much for listening. We'll see you next week at this time. You've been listening to the Chips Podcast on WERW Real College Radio.
Nice. Yeah, we talked a lot less about basketball than I thought.